so happy. I've wanted you to watch this. I talked about nothing else all week. My house is just like, you need to shut up about this stupid movie. No, I can't. I won't.
I'm so excited to have watched this. What an experience.
What a roller coaster. What a roller coaster we were just on. Welcome to the Cinderella podcast, where we watch and review every Cinderella adaptation we can get our hands on, discussing usually the same story over and over until we go insane. I'm Liv.
I'm Talon, and today we watched Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time. This is the 2007 second direct-to-video sequel to the original Cinderella Disney animated cartoon. We're going to go ahead and call this the Doctor Who Cinderella, because there are some serious time travel shenanigans.
Oh, there so are. There so are. So I've been so excited. I've been texting Talon all week. I'm so excited. We get to watch this movie. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So Talon, tell us, how does this story begin? What's the deal with this story?
Okay. Well, before we can even begin there, I just want to say that Wikipedia describes this feature as a direct-to-video fantasy adventure film, which is correct. So just get ready for that. It was directed by Daniel Brendanson, who is a producer and screenwriter best known as the co-writer of Camp Rock 2, The Final Jam, and the writer of Hannah Montana, the movie, as well as Wizards of Waverly Place, the movie.
So the deep dive I went into was the IMDb trivia page, which was sadly lacking, but did include the fact that there is a big dramatic horse scene towards the end of the movie, and that is the inspiration for the Flynn and Maximus scene in Tangled.
Wow.
And that the scene where he flies through the air and lands on a sail and cuts his way down it with a knife. This is a Cinderella, guys. I promise. I promise this is a Cinderella. This happens. Is taken from Peter Pan.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we open on a really weird line, which we both kind of fixated on for probably longer than necessary. And it's a voiceover. We see, by the way, yet a different castle. It's similar to the first two we saw, but it's not the same castle.
It's better than the one from the second one.
The ones from the second one?
Okay. It is better than both of the castles we see in the second Cinderella, but it is still worse than the one we saw in the original.
The village has also changed dramatically. It is now no longer a single street full of houses with mansard roofs. Mansard roofs are those really cool roofs. The third story is mostly roof, but the roof is like really steep, so it's still kind of a whole story. It was done for tax reasons. But now they're not. Now it's just this village full of huts. So the whole town is different now, but we're just going to ignore that.
It's also apparently now a seaside kingdom, which it definitely wasn't before.
Oh, it definitely wasn't before, but it is now. And we get a voiceover.
I wrote this down word for word if you didn't.
Could you? Because I didn't.
Okay. So we kind of are seeing like a portrait of Cinderella, and we're seeing this girl from the back, and it's obviously Cinderella, but whatever. And the voiceover goes, "Do you remember the story of a girl who lived a life of cinders and how she found true love because she kept a beautiful dream in her heart?"
So what did you write in your notes after this? Because I wrote a lot of things in my notes after this line.
I then wrote the next thing that she says out loud, which is, "It also helps to have mouse friends who can sew and a fairy godmother who could do wonders with pumpkins." And then she goes, "Well, that girl is me," as she turns around.
Yeah. So
her nose scritches. She smiles
scritches.
And they animate her nose scritching, which really upset me for some reason.
Yeah. So one, yes, we very much remember the story of Cinderella. Just want to be very clear, the two of us, we remember the story of Cinderella.
Oh boy, do we.
We sure do. We are the definition of remembering. Also, you did not have a life of cinders. We watched you. You were not dirty. You were clean.
Yeah, they never talked about the whole cinders part of Cinderella in the first film, which was kind of weird. Like they never
Well, that's why we assumed that that
explain
was her
it.
given name. That
Yes.
so this whole bit with the cinders was just a weird flex of
I was so mad. It was such a like late to the game, late to the party statement where it
yep.
was like I would have rather you had continued not
Just
acknowledging it.
just don't. You could have substituted any word there for cinders. You could have substituted dishes or chores. And we're like, yeah, a life of chores.
Servitude.
We watched her have a life of chores and servitude. We watched that. That's fine. It wasn't cinders though. It wasn't cinders.
I mean, I don't want to get pedantic about the specific kind of chore she did or did not do, but I do want to say it bothered me also.
So we then cut to her running barefoot down the stairs and we get a close up of her feet. My note is, well, at least she has toes, but she doesn't have toenails. And I was really upset about it because we had to pause the movie at that time because we had a technical problem. And so I was just frozen on this picture of her with 10 very lovely toes and deliberately zero toenails. And it made my skin crawl. So
Yeah, I just noticed that the foot looked less weird than before.
it
Because
does
before
until
she
you,
had like a Barbie foot where it was just a wedge.
yeah. Is it better to have a wedge foot or individuated toes with no toenails?
It didn't bother me nearly as much as it bothered you. Like I didn't even pay attention to it.
All right. So we
So now
open
you're the
on
weird one paying attention to feet too much.
I'm gonna blame this on you. So we have now a horrible song.
Ooh.
Um, all of the songs in this movie are horrible. There's a lot of them. They are all awful.
They're all terrible and they are trying to be more Disney-like than the ones in the previous sequel, which did not try at all.
Yes.
Um, so these managed to be both annoying and like more bland.
Yes. They were trying to be Disney songs rather than a potential pop song. They failed. Very creatively. They failed enthusiastically. And again and again and again and again.
Oof.
But the song we open with is I have it down as the perfectly perfect song.
Yes. Mhm.
And it's just her singing this incredibly schmaltzy song about how she's had the perfectly perfect year and she has a perfectly perfect husband and a perfectly perfect. I wish I was exaggerating, y'all.
No, that's literally the structure of the song. All
We
because I fit a shoe.
I'm a princess and a wife just because I fit a shoe. Why are you bringing that up? Why are you illustrating how stupid that is? We get some interaction with her and the prince. He's giving her a pair of normal shoes that he had to rescue from the mice because they were using them for boats. And
This is stated to us in a line by him,
so
which means that he knows that mice have antics. In case you're
yes,
wondering about
yes.
that.
So essentially, it is their 1 year anniversary. They had a perfect year. At this point, we assume that this is the year anniversary that takes place after the second movie. Just chronologically, that makes sense right now.
Mhm.
We then have a dark cut to the stepsisters who are all at their house doing a mountain of dishes. A comically, a Bilbo Baggins has just had dinner with the dwarves level of dishes.
Okay, when you say we like shift to the stepsisters, like the music turns spooky. There's like pouring rain. Everything suddenly becomes purple. There's thunder. You're like, oh, and then Dracula shows up because
Yeah,
it's like very creepy.
it's the same song, but they move it to a minor key,
And
which
it's loud.
and it's loud. It's so I do actually really like it when movies will use a previously happy song and move it to a minor key or change it in some way to make it dark and upsetting. I really love it when music does that. So as much as I hated the song, I wasn't mad that they included this. We find that the stepsisters have had a terribly awful year. They have to do all their own chores now and they're poor and
Oh, I
we're
feel so
supposed to
bad.
yeah, we're supposed to be feeling bad for them, I guess. So Anastasia gets thrown out of the kitchen for some reason and sees Cinderella and the prince on horseback riding off to their picnic in the distance. And then she sings a different song in the middle of this
Okay,
song.
slow down, slow down. You missed like five things. We gotta go back.
Oh God. All right, you go
You're
back to
going
wherever
too
you.
fast.
I have so many notes. I've got like 10 pages of notes.
I have so many notes. Okay, so they're doing literally all of the dishes in the world that exist. And they're
Yes.
complaining, like, why should we have to do the chores? And as they're singing this, like, we had a terrible, awful year, they start to shove each other. It's Anastasia and Drusilla, the two stepsisters, and they're pushing each other around and generally being bad to each other. And the stepmother walks in and they complain about how terrible this is. And she goes, pathetic. Um, it's a good
That
moment.
that line made me laugh so hard.
And then she gets knocked out in the ensuing scuffle, like knocked outside. And she looks up, and Cinderella and the prince are riding horses, holding hands, and just going, ha 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 ha, ha ha
Yes.
ha ha ha.
So
And it's just such a clear contrast of what a wonderful time they're having. And it's so obnoxious because they keep laughing. Like, it's not just like one laugh, it's like literally like four laughs.
yep, it's very, the animators really wanted you to know what was happening in the scene. They wanted to make sure you didn't miss it. If you went to the bathroom and came back, they wanted to make sure it was still happening so that you didn't miss this critical moment of this story.
So this is like a thing about this movie in that everything is just overacted. Like they overact with their faces, which is
Mhm.
incredible in an animated film.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And they overact with their lines, they overact with like physical comedy, not in a like cartoony way specifically, but just in a
Again, we have these people animated a bad actor. This is good animation of a terrible actor.
yeah.
It's really quite weird. So Anastasia now sings a different song in the middle of this perfectly perfect, terribly awful song about how she wants love.
Yes.
Right.
Specifically, she wants somebody to love her.
Yes.
And so then we get like a rendition of this perfectly perfect, and she's looking for the perfectly perfect love.
So that ends, thank God. And
I
we
just
cut
have a
to
note that says bad animation, and then why is the forest glowing? Oh, I was mad because the stepsisters' dress is still like very just shapes, like two circles and a triangle, and then like an
uh-huh.
oval skirt thing.
Yeah,
And I was
no, they
so
didn't.
mad because they didn't add more detail to it, even though they changed the style of the animation with literally everything else.
Nope. They chose to keep that part the way it was. So Anastasia now finishes her song about how she wants someone to be in love with her and notices that the forest is glowing and makes her way towards this glowing forest, which just, I mean, bad idea. Don't go towards glowing forests. It's not,
It's not continuously glowing, it's like flickering with a glow.
yeah, it's an electrical fire
Very
waiting to
spooky.
happen. So we cut to the glittering forest. It is, of course, the fairy godmother doing exposition in song form and making a magical picnic for the Prince and Cinderella's 1 year anniversary. I just have exposition here.
Yeah, she just sings about like how it was a perfect year, the mice jump around, stuff happens.
It's
Um,
nothing
and
is gained in this scene. It's except for Anastasia is now physically present there, hiding, sees the magic and says, "I wonder if she has another wand to spare."
yeah, she also pogos without a pogo stick over to the tree. She like bounces in some
Yeah.
weird way and then is like peeking out,
The
watching all the magic happening.
the locomotion in this movie is beyond bonkers. Just
The
it,
choices continue to be baffling.
they do. So the fairy godmother finishes her song and dramatically flings her wand out of her hand and it lands directly in front of Anastasia.
Hmm.
And who grabs it and races back to her mother like, "Oh, okay, we're going fast now. The plot is starting for real. Okay."
Oh yeah, the plot moves like a mile a minute.
Yeah.
So she has a moment of like, oh, so that's how she did it because the fairy godmother transforms Cinderella and the prince into their original outfits.
In case we forgot.
In case we forgot, basically. So Anastasia runs straight to her mother with the wand, and Drusilla's there as well. And she goes, Mother, our troubles are over. holds out the magic wand, and Lady Tremaine goes, "A stick."
It's so
Uh,
great.
and then the other stepsister, Drusilla, goes, "Let's beat her with it."
Yeah. So I did like Lady Tremaine in this one a whole bunch. I don't know if they switched voice actors again
They
or
did
if
not.
they did not. Okay, well then she like upped her game or got some coffee or something because her scary Lady Tremaine voice was much better.
I think the material she had to work with was also much better because Lady Tremaine wasn't like actively being very scary.
It's true. So she does get a lot of very cutting lines in this one, and
Yes,
it's fun because Lady Tremaine is a
that's
great
what you
villain.
want.
That's what you want for your villain. So Anastasia tries to remember the magic words.
Ugh.
It's dumb. She finally remembers, but before she can say boo, the fairy godmother walks out of the woods and tells her to give the wand back because it could be dangerous. My note then says, "There's a struggle. Lucifer gets a duck body. More hijinks."
So what happens is the wand gives off like a shot of magic, and it bounces or goes through the hole in an axe. It basically it bounces off metal and hits Lucifer. And at first you don't see what it did, but then he walks like further into frame, and he's got the head of a cat on the body of a duck, and it's creepy.
It is creepy. And in this process of trying to get the wand away from Anastasia, the fairy godmother gets accidentally turned to stone.
It's horrifying, and Anastasia's immediately like,
Oh no.
"Oh,
Oh, I'm
I
so
didn't
sorry.
mean to. I'm sorry."
Yes. So Lady Tremaine is happy now, and she says, "Girls, do you know what this mean?" And Drizella goes, "No more laundry." So I'm with you, Drizella. I feel
I
you,
mean,
girl.
yes, that is what I would do with a magic wand.
Yeah, just no more laundry. And so then Lady Tremaine goes, "No, power, riches, revenge." And the stepsisters go, "Oh."
It's
And
incredible.
it's so great.
Here are the wishes of the two stepsisters. Drusilla yells, "I want to be filthy, stinking rich." And Anastasia yells, "I want a prince of my own." And then Lady Tremaine is so evil that she can't use a magic wand normally. She has to
Nope.
like chant an evil curse and
Yes.
send like beams of green smoke like up into the sky, and she calls on the forces of the universe, and like scary lightning appears, and she goes, "Reverse the moon and sun, unravel Cinderella's happily ever after, to the moment my troubles began."
And then says bibbity bobbity boo very menacingly, which,
It's so creepy. I can't do it. It's incredible.
yeah, it's really creepy. And so what we're watching while this is happening is there's green swirly smoke on the screen, and we're watching things that we just saw. So Cinderella and the prince at their picnic, but they're now getting pulled away from one another. And we rewind further back in time, and we get Cinderella and the prince as she runs down the stairs of their wedding. And they get pulled apart as he reaches for her, and they get pulled away
It's
at the
so
dance, and they
dramatic.
get pulled away. It's genuinely extremely creepy,
It
genuinely.
it's really good use of animation because you think you're seeing the same animation again, just played in reverse.
But you're not.
But then like something wild happens. Like at one point when Cinderella's coming down the stairs, like in the memory towards the shoe, she's getting pulled back and she's like fighting against it. She's not just
Yes.
walking backwards up the stairs. She's like being pulled away.
Yeah, and their facial expressions change as they try to keep reaching for one another and get pulled away. It's very upsetting, actually.
It's great.
Yeah. So Lady Tremaine stops time right as the Grand Duke is arriving at their home to try on the shoe the first time in the original.
Yes. And Cinderella at this moment is up where she was in the first one. She's locked in her room, and the mice are like about to unlock it for her.
So Lady Tremaine stops the announcer guy from reading his long proclamation and just says, "Please proceed with the shoe trying on. We all know what's happening here." And he goes to try it on Anastasia. Obviously, doesn't fit because her feet are massive. They try to do the foreshortening joke where you're showing the foot first and then the head, and it's like a foreshortening thing, but it's not foreshortened. Her foot is just 100 feet long.
Yeah, like when they put the shoe on her, they put it on her big toe
And it barely fits.
and it barely fits. It was weird. They play around a lot with the size of the shoe and the size of the foot, like visually, and
And
it's not consistent.
it's not. But Lady Tremaine bibbity bobbity boos it, and the shoe grows and fits Anastasia's foot, and everyone is very shocked. And Anastasia kisses her shoe and runs around screaming, "It fits, it fits, it fits." And we get a lot of fun Drizella one-liners of, "Gee, I wonder if it fits." And I just she has a lot
Drusilla's
of
like her mean goth sister, and I'm here for it.
she yeah, Drizella, man, she has a lot of good one-liners. I don't really like what they did with her character in this one, but she has a lot of good one-liners.
Yes. Well, listen, if we start talking about what they did to which character, we'll be here for the rest of time.
This is true.
None of the characters have stayed consistent from any other iteration that we've seen them in, and
Nope.
everyone just has an entirely new personality except for Lady Tremaine, who
Yes.
just has the same personality but taken to the next level.
Yeah, Drizella is still very mean, but she's now actively mean towards her sister, where she wasn't actively, just aggressively cutting. And so Anastasia puts the shoe on and leaves with the Grand Duke. And Cinderella, at this point, has freed herself from the room upstairs and runs down the stairs going,
No, it can't be. And
"Oh."
Lady Germaine says, I must have a word with my maid.
So they leave, the Grand Duke and Anastasia and the stepsisters leave. Lady Tremaine goes up the stairs, blocks Cinderella with her cane, and goes, "You look confused, my dear." And it was just, mm, that line made my skin crawl.
Oh, it was great. It was it
It was
was really
awful.
good.
It was, yeah, it was wonderfully awful.
And then she goes, whatever you think happened last night was a dream. And she takes the shoe, Cinderella's glass slipper, and she drops it off of where they're standing on the stairs and it shatters. And she
Mhm.
goes, I don't care where you go or what you do, but you stay away from the prince. Oh, and clean up that broken glass.
Oh, it's so dramatic. And Cinderella is just, I mean, bad pun, but she's shattered. She's just,
Oh, yeah.
she's crushed and confused and just, I have big gaslighting vibes from this, and it was just any film where the villain does gaslighty things of like, "You look confused. What? Why do you think something weird is happening?"
Oof.
I just, makes my skin crawl.
So Cinderella is in like a fugue state and she closes the door and she like walks away from the door and just her face is just completely blank and she's saying to herself, what just happened? I don't understand. And she starts the next song, which goes like, I've always dreamed that my life could be like a fairy tale, a perfect fantasy, and how it was so much more than a dream when they danced together, and how much she loves the prince and how she
Mhm.
feels it slipping away from her. And Gus is crying.
Yep. At which point the mice say, "Hey," I don't have the lines, guys, but they say, "The prince knows he danced with you. You don't look anything like Anastasia. You can just go find him." And Cinderella goes, "Oh, that's right." Like, yes, not everybody has face blindness, Cinderella. You are not in a mask. You could just go. You very clearly don't look like Anastasia, and you were in no way disguised. So, this is not the first time I've watched this movie. I'm ashamed to admit. But the first time I watched this, this was where I was going, "Oh, this is a Cinderella doing something sensible. I I really like this. This is really great. I love that there's not magic for her to lean on. I love that she is overcoming her obstacles with very sensible things of like, well, hey, he saw me and talked to me. Like, I'm sure that's going to count for something."
Oh, that's sweet.
She
So
then
there's
sings another song about trusting her heart and dreams coming true. And my notes say that we wind up in the Sound of Music for a little bit because she's just in a field in the middle of nowhere in a dress with an apron, just sort of spinning around with her arms open, singing.
Yeah, do you think that was on purpose? Because that was so similar.
I hope so, but if it's not, it was subconscious because she just walks into the Sound of Music for a bit. Then she goes to the palace. And she can't go in the main gate because there are big guards. Gus tries to fight them and she tells him that's dumb. So she tries the servants' entrance. And like a brilliant person who's used to doing chores and sort of getting what she wants, she looks over and there's a line of people carrying stuff in, just big wheels of cheese and bags of flour and stuff. And so she walks over to the person distributing big wheels of cheese and holds out her hand for a big wheel of cheese. And he looks at her kind of suspiciously and she smiles and she's beautiful. So he smiles back and gives her the cheese and she walks into the palace with everybody else. And I was like, yeah, no, that's how I broke into so many dorms when I was in college. Just like, no, I live here.
I thought this was a really great version of Cinderella having agency and being smart in
Hmm.
a way that made so much sense for her character.
Hmm.
Don't get used to that, friends,
Oh,
because Cinderella becomes like an action girl in this.
yeah.
Just this is what I like, and what happens next is the part I don't like,
Yep.
is what I would like to share with you all.
So she carries the cheese in, but then does not go back out and stays inside. And she bumps into Prudence, the governess from the last movie,
I was
who
so excited to see Prudence. I don't know why I was excited to see Prudence, but I saw her because you see her from the back first, and she's
yeah.
like, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And then like I'm like, "Oh, is that?" And
Yes,
then
it's
they show her
Prudence.
and like she's wearing like a different matching eyeshadow to her different matching outfit, which is what she
Hmm.
did in the
Hmm.
previous one. And I'm like, "Oh, it's
It's
Prudence."
Prudence.
And then I was like, "Why do I care?"
You
The
gotta get the little things.
sequence of films now has like a continuity, and I was excited.
This film builds up so much continuity for the first two-thirds, I guess, and then just shatter. Okay. So Prudence is grilling Cinderella, saying, "Who are you? I know all the servants here, and I've never seen you before." And Cinderella, thinking fast, goes, "I am the royal mouse catcher."
Snap them and trap them.
Yep, that's her phrase. It's great. And it's a really fun moment of her thinking fast on her feet because she has mice in her pocket and she drops them on the ground. And Prudence says, "In all my years here, we've never, ever, ever had a rodent problem." And as she says that, the maids in the kitchen, the other room, start screaming, "Mice!" And mm, they get kitchen hijinks where people are chasing the mice and hitting things and things fall over. My note here is Gus swings like Tarzan with sausages.
So what the mice are doing that made everybody scream mice isn't just like running across the floor or
Oh
whatever.
no, that'd be
Like
so basic.
in the previous one, they like overdo it when they're trying to get noticed. So
Mhm.
Jacques is like standing up and just like with both hands picking up eggs and throwing them onto the floor.
Yeah, like mice too.
You know, mouse things. And yeah, Gus swings through the ceiling and like is chewing through a hot dog while he does it, and is
He's
just
also making
walking with
he's
a
also
full sausage.
he's also making the Tarzan yell, by the way. He
Yes.
that little moment made me happy for no reason.
So Cinderella keeps trying to convince Prudence that like she can help with this, and Prudence runs around the kitchen with a broom, certain that she can handle it herself. She slides on some food. She falls in face first into a bucket of tomatoes, and then the metal bucket falls onto her head. And now Cinderella has a net. I don't know where she got the net.
It's a
And she's
butterfly net,
like,
by the
yeah,
way. It's a butterfly net, just for visual help.
yes. And she's like, well, I'll just get those mice. Come on, guys. And
And then
now
we're done
she
with that
works in the
scene.
palace.
Yeah, we're done with that scene then. We then cut to the prince and the king fencing. How many of these lines did you get down? Because I got down the gist, and that's basically all. And then I got really sidetracked on a fencing. I got sidetracked real bad. So,
I tried, but they were moving fast. They're fencing, and it starts with the line, "Those aren't reasons," because we're joining them mid
conversation.
scene.
Yeah.
And presumably the princess said something along the lines of like wanting to marry for love or something. We don't know. They literally didn't show us. And the
Yeah.
king's like, you need good breeding. And Something.
deportment, something. It just things that kings like, and basically it comes down
And
to
not
you-
their choice in transparent footwear.
that was a good
And
line.
yes, and the prince is like, it's not about the slipper, it's about the girl in the slipper. And it's not the fact that she's a size 4.5, it's that's all he has to go on.
Yeah. So the king is saying, there's the king says, "Do you think she's the only woman in the kingdom who wears a size 4.5?" But what's
Right.
happening while this is going on, I was on the fencing team in college, everybody, so I'm really sorry for what's about to happen, unless Talon cuts it all, in which case you won't know this happened. So the king goes to get a pear, and the prince just swords it out of his hand. He just slices it, sticks it, and tosses it. And the king says, "Nice parry. That's not a parry. That's a lunge. A parry is when you block a blow." I'm so sorry.
So
Because then I was
anyway,
just looking at their sword fighting, and the prince has got a table in front of him, and he's just sort of lounging, daydreaming on his hand, and rapidly sword fighting. But he's not even sword fighting. He's just doing random uh, parry, parry, parry. It's not. That's not how you sword fight. I understand this is animation, and I know that I'm really picky about this. I'm gonna stop now.
so anyway, the prince has a face now. Before he had like the suggestion of a face, but now they've fully animated his face and he has a lot of different expressions and emotions. And it turns out I hate it.
Yeah, he gets a personality, but that personality is himbo.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm himbo. Just he also doesn't get a name, by the way.
I wasn't going to tell them that until the
Oh,
end.
okay, you can cut that.
No. I think that's hilarious.
He
You
doesn't
see,
get a name. It's
they
been 3
don't,
movies.
no one calls him by anything other than Your Highness. I thought at some point we'd see Cinderella call him something other than that, but no, circumstances dictate that she must also call him Your Highness.
It would have been a really great thing to have when she meets him, to be able to call him by name, something that maybe the regular person wouldn't know that his name, and that would be a moment of connection. But no, we don't get that. That's not a thing that happens.
I would have been happy, I would have accepted if at any point she had been like, there he is, my Prince Charming. But that doesn't happen either. No one calls him Charming.
Nope. So we are actually still in the middle of this conversation, sword fight
What you
nonsense
have
scene.
to know what you have to know is that the prince is incredibly athletic and acrobatic and is like
Mhm.
bouncing off of things and basically like doing all sorts of fancy footwork
He's
while
got
he's
a
sword fighting with his dad.
He's also got a trapeze, so he's doing massive trapeze stunts by himself, and he's got like parallel bars. He just has a whole gymnasium in this room, and he's just levitating around it athletically. And we get the information that the king was very much in love with his dead wife. And
Okay, this is incredible because this is revealed to us by revealing a painting of the king and the late queen. And she's like very young looking with red hair and is sitting like outside in this garden. And he's sitting like basically in her lap. And he's so tiny. And he's
mhm,
always been tiny. And they've
mhm.
got him looking the way he looks now. So either he's been very old for a very long time or she's very young and something, I don't know. The age difference is intense and he's sitting in her lap and he's very small.
I like this backstory. We find out that the king just touched her hand and knew the stars were brighter that night. I have so many feelings about the king because in the first movie, he's just this weird toddler who changes color and exists only in extreme rage or extreme joy. That's it.
Mhm.
And we also get that here, except he doesn't turn colors, which is annoying. If you're going to animate somebody who exists only in extreme rage or extreme joy, you should at least make their face turn purple every once in a while. But he also gets this side of him that's very nostalgic and sort
Mhm.
of, oh, well, just let them go. It's fine. And it comes out of nowhere. And it makes sense that we see it now because he's thinking about his wife who he dearly loved. And it's okay. that makes sense. It's reasonable. I'm here for it. And we get an announcement that the shoe has arrived, and so the prince races off into the room where Anastasia is sitting on a chair, and Lady Tremaine and Drizella are behind her. And he walks into the room and he goes, there's big dramatic music, and it sort of fades off in that comedy wah 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 kind of way. And the prince
It like
says,
sours.
it does. It's really great. And the prince goes, "Am I in the right room? There seems to be a mix up because Anastasia is not Cinderella."
I do like that they're working off the fact that they had sent the Grand Duke to
Mhm.
make all the girls try on the shoe
Yeah.
to see which one was Cinderella. So if they had just sent the prince to every house,
Wow.
that would have achieved the same thing to just look at a person.
Yes.
So I don't know.
I don't know what they
But
thought they were.
I do like that they're going off the bit where we never saw the prince do that like we do in other Cinderellas. Because if we had seen the prince do that, then this wouldn't work.
Yes. So the prince gives a kind of rambly, polite little speech of, well, yes, I know the royal proclamation said that, but you're not the girl I danced with. So thank you so much for coming, and I will have someone escort you home, essentially. And
Mhm.
the stepmother magics him into forgetting the real Cinderella. My note here goes Rasputin magic because it very much has a Rasputin vibe.
Anastasia.
It does. It has a Rasputin vibe. She changes his memory so that he remembers dancing with Anastasia and he doesn't remember Cinderella at all, and then magics him into deciding to get married that night. So the spell hits him right as he's getting to the door. And he turns around, and what does he say, Talon?
He says, "Wait, hold the trumpet. It's all
Hold
coming back."
hold the trumpet. I can't.
So you like that part too?
The lake is not really okay. Okay. So the prince kneels down and says, "Well, I know it's a little early," and pulls out a box and he goes, "But will you marry me?" And Anastasia shrieks, "Yes," and then starts screaming, "Yippee," falls over backwards, still screaming, "Yippee," grabs at the ring. It falls out of her hands. There's hijinks as she bounces around the room trying to get it. She eventually gets it. It's a little too small for her finger, so she does the kind of gross thing where you just put your entire finger in your mouth and cover your finger with spit, and then the ring gets on. And then her stepmother is like, and she stands up and attempts to be graceful and go, "I mean, yes, I would be delighted. It's way too little, way too late. But nice try, honey."
um, Thankfully, the prince is still in some sort of magic-induced brain fog and does not remark on that at all. And basically, they're like, "We're having the ceremony tonight," which means they are sticking with the 1 day or less notification of an impending ball.
Of all the things to be consistent about in this universe, of all the things they've changed, why is the 1 day party rule something that they decided to stick with? Why was that
Um,
their ride or die thing?
it's clearly tradition. It's what this kingdom is founded on.
So, fortunately, while all this magic nonsense was happening, the mice were there to see it all, and they flee the room to go find Cinderella and tell her about this. In the meantime, Cinderella is sneaking through the palace again with a butterfly net. The stepsisters go by and she hides behind, I don't know, something. And then Lucifer is there and almost finds her, but doesn't because he's called away by Lady Tremaine. And then the prince walks by and Cinderella chases after him and just kind of goes, "Your Highness," and then just giggles.
This is the part where I'm like, why is she calling him your highness?
Why does she call him? What did we decide his name was? James?
I think we decided on James.
Yeah. Why doesn't she call him James? Why doesn't she call him Duchess? She should know. If nobody
um,
got that joke, you should be patrons. Go be patrons. You'll get that joke. So she says, "It's wonderful to see you again." And he goes, "I'm sorry, have we met?"
And she thinks that he's flirting back, and she's like, "Oh, well, I believe we danced last night at the ball." And she's still like giggling the whole time.
And he goes, "Maybe you've mistaken me for some other prince." And she laughs and drops the butterfly net, and they start to have a connection because they both reach for the butterfly net, but they don't touch
Well,
hands.
she also goes, "You're quite the dancer."
Yeah, and his eyes go magic green again, which she doesn't notice. And he starts talking to her about, "Oh yes, the girl I married or the girl I danced with, she was lovely. I'm going to marry her." And she goes, "Marry her?" And he goes, "Tonight." And she goes, "Tonight?" And he goes, "Well, yes, once you've danced with Anastasia." And continues on with sentences. She's shook. Um
We also get a lot of like weird nostril shots in this
they
moment where they're
yeah.
like animating her as if we're looking from the bottom up at her face, but they
sh-
literally draw out her nostrils, and they did that with the prince in the fencing scene as well.
It's it's a weirdly Voldemorty nose that she's
It's not
got.
great.
It's it's bizarre. It's not that hard to animate a nose. I mean,
Anyway, so Prudence shows up on the scene and is like, "Oh, this is not great," and is trying to drag Cinderella away, who's just completely shaken and goes, "But it was me."
it's a
And
very sad scene.
yeah, and as she's being pulled away, she's looking towards the prince. And as the prince is walking away, he's like looking over his shoulder, and they both leave at opposite ends of like this hall that they met at.
And the prince looks sort of sad and confused. His interactions toward her, which at this point I'm still fascinated by because he's just been accosted by a random servant who approached him and goes, "I danced with you last night." And he's being polite but clearly confused because he's been magicked. And
Mhm.
so it's a really interesting dynamic and I was totally here for it.
I think that they were trying to walk the line between him clearly having like feeling some sort of pull towards Cinderella
Yeah.
without making it look like he would cheat on his fiance as a person.
Yes, I think that must have been the line they were going for because they do have this pull, but they're also trying to paint him as just a very upright, decent man.
Like there's not
S-
even the suggestion that he's like attracted to her. He's just sort of like, "Well, she seems bizarre."
Yes, it's a sad scene. It's rough. Anyways, Prudence takes Cinderella down to the basement and tells her to make sure everything is free of mice, which is pretty funny because about 4 minutes ago, Prudence declared that she'd never ever seen a mouse in the history of her life, but now Cinderella has to go clean all the mice. And the mice find Cinderella there,
She's crying.
and she's crying, as makes sense. This is a good time for a cry. And they say they found the prince, and Cinderella goes, "I found him, but he doesn't remember me." And the mice say
The
magic and tell her the same story that we just watched. My notes are insane, bizarre, Anastasia. Oh my god.
so what the mice do is they act out the story by like dressing up like characters and doing like their hair and stuff.
Hmm.
And kind of putting on a little play for Cinderella. And they're like, "She made him forget." And so Cinderella is like, "Magic, that explains it." I was personally very thankful that they chose to just get rid of that whole she doesn't know that he's been magicked and she thinks that he doesn't love her for real, like that whole possible dilemma, which
Hmm.
in most stories that would be the driving plot. I'm so glad
Yes.
we avoided that. That's my least
Yes.
favorite plot.
It was a very good plot point that they very wisely avoided, and I was happy about it because now it gives us a very reasonable thing to go do.
Hmm.
Go
Hmm.
on Magic Prince. It's a very achievable goal.
So Cinderella's like, "Magic, that explains it." And she has a plan right away. She goes, "Boys, we have to get that wand." And it immediately shows us Lady Tremaine tucking the wand into her sleeve.
So the Grand Duke is explaining to Lady Tremaine that he has been put in charge of all the wedding preparations, and she's being very snide with him. and we open a door to see said wedding preparations. I have that they have a 15-story cake.
That sounds
This
about right.
Yeah, this cake is definitely more than 50 feet tall.
It's huge. There's all this food, there's all these flowers,
Just
and
massive amounts of food. Drizella immediately goes to the wedding cake, takes her hand, wipes her hand across the frosting, and just starts eating it. And I was just this
strong
was the
sibling
part
energy.
this is the part where the stepsister started becoming too much, because they are ungraceful and they are loud and cruel and unthinking and selfish and spoiled and have no taste. But there's no sense in the previous movie that they are barbarians. They're
Just not fit for society.
just not fit for society, just raised by wolves. They're well-bred young ladies who are horrific human beings who lack any kind of grace or kindness, but they're not monsters.
They know what social expectations are.
Yeah.
Like they
So this
know
is
enough to know when they're breaking, like,
they would know that that would not be acceptable behavior anywhere. I
yeah.
d-
But anyway, they run through the room and they're swiping at all the food and they're kind of pushing each other meanwhile.
and
And
Anastasia is allergic to roses, so she picks up a big bouquet of roses and then sneezes all the roses away.
yes, at which point Lady Tremaine says that these preparations are entirely unacceptable and that her daughter has a delicate constitution and that everything must reflect her daughter's elegance. Meanwhile, the two sisters are having a full-on food fight,
Full on food fight. And
starting with Anastasia calling Drizella a pig. And then
yep.
Drizella takes the apple from the roasted pig's mouth and stuffs it in Anastasia's mouth, who then spits it out, and it just devolves from there.
So the next scene is the prince talking to the king, saying, "Dad, wait till you meet her. She has everything, breeding, refinement." And they open the door onto this food fight, and the cake falls and splatters everywhere. And there's just this long beat of silence. And the Grand Duke is panicking, as he always does, because his only mode is panic or snobbery. And he goes, "Oh, I'll clean it all up." And the king does the, "Well, you better," or finger across the throat. Just sort of out of nowhere. It comes from nowhere, it doesn't go anywhere. It's a weird thing to include. I don't know why they chose to animate that.
Well, it's because that's exactly what he says last time
Yeah,
when
but it's
he's
not.
like, "I'm going to bed," and this
But
better
it
anyway.
was it was dumb then. That was a
The
weird
king,
callback. Of all the
yes.
callbacks to have, that was a weird one. They have
Well,
several
they keep trying
callbacks.
to remind us that this is like based on a movie we saw because it doesn't resemble it in any way. The
Yeah.
king also says when they walk in, "Are we in the right room?"
Yes,
Um, which was cute.
that is cute. There were a couple of funny moments. So the prince introduces Anastasia, who has a whole bunch of cake just on her head. She curtsies to the king, and the cake falls off her head and lands in the king's hand, and he wipes it on the Grand Duke. And there's another long moment of awkward silence. And the prince goes, "Shall we dance?"
Which was weird, but okay.
So a band is hastily constructed, and they go to dance, and Anastasia says, "I'm sorry, I don't dance much." And basically just keeps screwing up the fact that she wasn't dancing with him last night. She keeps screwing up.
Hmm.
And the prince says, "I'll never forget when I first touched your hand," as he touches her hand and has this great facial expression of, "Oh no, something is wrong. There was clearly a spark when I touched, finger quote, your hand last night, and something doesn't feel right, and I'm very confused." They try to dance. It does not go well. She steps on his feet a lot. A comedy moment that I do really like is she still has one glass slipper on, and it clinks every time she takes a step. So we get, and they really lean into the soundscaping of that. So it's shuffle clink, shuffle shuffle clink, shuffle clink. It's just overdone. It's really funny.
So not only does it match like their dance, it also emphasizes like the last beat in the music. So it goes da 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 da, clink 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 clink,
Yep.
basically.
And every time she steps on his feet, the band hits a wrong note, so the music goes sour. And so as
Mm-hmm.
she steps on his feet more and more, the music, which is that famous waltz, just goes sour and flatter and sour and flatter. And it's
And
great.
every single time she goes, sorry, sorry,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, sorry. And so it's this chorus of sorries until like the very last one where
She
she
steps on,
steps on her own skirt and kind
mhm,
of
falls
knocks
over.
herself on her butt.
Yup. My note is the king is looking on and looks very charmed by this,
Yes.
which is weird.
I had
Uh
I had that note too, and I was like, he's looking very dreamily
yeah,
at
just
the
oh,
two
this
of them
is so
dancing.
lovely. I'm confused. And the prince asks if Anastasia's okay, and she goes, "Oh, these aren't my shoes." Realizes she's wearing the glass shoes and goes, "I mean, they are my shoes, but they're not. I'm I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me."
And then she just sort of collapses with her face in her hands and is just like clearly very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And the prince is like, this was fun, thank you. If you'll please excuse me.
And
And like is very nice to her and like leaves. And she's looking at him like she might actually be in love.
yeah, she caught the feelings.
And she goes to herself, he was nice to me.
And Drizella responds with, "Cause he's under a spell." Drizella with
Uh,
the zingers in this one. She's being really mean. They're mean zingers, but damn, they're funny.
So the king and the prince and the grand duke are walking away, and they're basically talking about how the prince feels like there's something wrong, and the grand duke's like, we'll get a dozen dance instructors, and then the king goes, an army of dance instructors, and the prince is trying to explain that when he touched her hand he felt nothing.
It basically just ends there. That's we just cut from there to the king announcing that he needs to speak with Anastasia immediately and alone. Ominous music.
Yes.
And Drizella whispers to her stepmother, "Let's make a run for it while we can." And so Anastasia is talking rapidly, just making excuses. Just, "Oh, I'm sorry, the shoes, the dress, and I was overwhelmed." He just making rapid excuses. And the king says, in a very gentle tone of voice, "You remind me of my former wife. She was a terrible dancer. Stepped on my feet, but she took good care of my heart." And he picks up a golden chocolate box?
Um, okay, so this moment is very sweet, but it is also happening in a room full of portraits. Like
Yes.
every square
Inch
inch is
is,
covered in a portrait, and they're
uh-huh.
all portraits of the redheaded lady, his late wife. Or you know what? We don't know she's dead. Maybe she's just been like on a trip for a long time.
I think it's safe to assume that she's dead.
I mean, she's
She's
definitely
dead.
dead. Okay, so at this point, I would like to point out that she has like curling red hair and actually does not look unlike Anastasia. And I kept picking it up like the king is smitten with Anastasia vibes. And like, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I understand
Thank
that
you.
that's weird,
No.
but
That's
I can't
abs
like not mention it because
that's
every single time he looked at her, he seemed like besotted. Also,
yes.
there is no spell on the king, and the king saw the prince dancing the previous night. And surely he would notice. Oh no, the king didn't. He was asleep. The
No,
Grand
he
Duke.
did. No, he did see. He saw through the spyglass and he saw that it was going well, and then he went to sleep. Admittedly, it was from a distance, but blonde and red are different colors.
Yeah, I feel like what's going on with the Grand Duke and the King that they're not like that's a different girl. By the way, the whole I want grandchildren very badly subplot is completely dropped.
Oh, completely dropped. The king
They
is
never
now.
mention it once. Now we're focusing on the dead wife
Mhm.
and how he was in love with her.
Yeah. So the king takes Anastasia out onto a balcony and says that he wants to give her something very valuable. It's a seashell. And he tells Anastasia that he and his dead wife found it while they were walking on the beach. It was the first day they met. They both reached for it, and when their hands touched, they knew it was true love. It's a cute, touching scene, actually. It's kind of cute.
Anastasia starts by looking excited that he's going to present her with something, to her face kind of falling when she sees that it's just a seashell. And then as he's telling her the story, she's kind of very taken in by it.
Hmm.
And you can see that she sees the value of this gift and she's not really disappointed anymore.
It's a really sweet scene, and it's well animated. And then the king, clearly having done enough emotions for the day, goes, and that's all. Run along.
He also says that when their hands touch, they found true love, and there's no more powerful force. Huh.
Oh,
Oh, do we
right.
think that that might be important later?
Clearly not, because I missed it entirely. Literally, it's not in my notes.
That's why I also made such a big deal of the way that the magic bounced off of metal,
Yeah.
because we saw that in that early scene too.
Yeah.
Dropping breadcrumbs for all of
Yeah.
you.
Breadcrumbs. There's no amount of breadcrumbs in the universe that could lead you from the beginning of this story to the end of this story. It's
I
just
mean, maybe to the end, as long as you skip everything in the middle.
okay. So Anastasia is now in a big mirror practicing saying, I do. My notes go, oh no, Anastasia song. Well, that was blessedly fast.
She sings an I do song, like, yes, I do, I want
Love
whatever.
something, whatever. It's done.
There's
Thank God.
2 pink butterflies, and the mirror that she's practicing in front of is really oversized and really creepy. And it keeps looking like something horrible is going to happen. But the horrible thing that happens is that Anastasia gets a song.
Yes. They play up the mirror aspect in this movie a lot. And
Yeah, and it doesn't go anywhere.
it never has a payoff other than making me very unhappy. So
Well, okay, there is like, if you kind of look at it sideways and squint, I'll mention it when we get there.
okay, that's fine. We get to Cinderella, and she has found a room that has suspicious green sparks shooting out from underneath the door, and goes and spies on the stepmother and Drizella. Drizella has the wand and is making insane dresses and jewelry.
Cinderella also tells the birds, "You go get the prince."
Right, right.
Drizzle is like laughing and having an amazing time,
Just
and
insane clothes, orange and pink and Marie Antoinette and massive. God, it's bizarre.
she's having a real good time.
She
And
is.
Lady Tremaine basically scolds her, and she gets turned back into herself. And Lady Tremaine takes the wand and she puts it in the closet, and then she locks it.
And she puts the key in her pocket.
Yes.
So Anastasia then comes around the corner, down the hallway, and almost catches Cinderella staring in at the keyhole like a perv. But she hides behind some curtains, and Anastasia enters the room. The mice convince Cinderella to let them go get the key because there's no way she can go in there and get it on her own.
It's too
And
dangerous, they
it's
say.
too dangerous. And Cinderella says, okay, fine, but stay clear of Lucifer. So we cut to the inside of the room, and Lady Tremaine is asking what happened with the king. Anastasia's telling this very sincere story about, oh, he gave me this seashell, and he was in love with his first wife, and la 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 la. And they make fun of her.
And then she goes, "Mother, I want the prince to love me. I think he could." And her sister bursts out laughing and then is like, "Oh, you're serious?" And
Yes.
Anastasia doubles down. She's like, "Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we don't even need the wand."
While all this is happening, the mice are doing antics to try to get the wand.
It's weirdly not as engaging as it was in the original Cinderella movie. It just mostly happens like towards the background, and they do it very quickly.
Yeah, they don't build the tension. Even the horrible scene in the first one where Lucifer gets stuck in the sleeve of a dress and has to like inchworm his way across the floor, that builds a lot of tension because a bad thing is coming slowly. This is just bizarre, and Lucifer's tail catches fire for no reason. Just that's part of the antics is his tail catches on fire.
It also doesn't seem like it's hard. Like the mice are so good at things now that like when you're watching the first one, you're kind of like, "Oh, can a mouse do
Do that?
this?" And then in this
Uh,
one, you're like, "These mice can do anything. It doesn't
they
matter. There are no
clearly
stakes."
practiced this. They know how to get keys out of this specific woman's pocket. It's not a big deal.
They also lose the physics aspect where you don't get the
Yeah.
sense that the key weighs anything, because
No.
sometimes it looks like it's really heavy and sometimes it looks like it's really light, and like one of them can carry it and then the other one is like swinging with
Yeah.
it, and
The
then
the
it's
continuity is yeah.
it's not as grounding, so you don't feel like it's as physically there, and so it feels more like whatever.
Yeah. So there's more hijinks. The mice get the key and wind up hiding under a teacup. Again, callback. The stepmother calls for housekeeping, and immediately there is a knock on the door. And she
Because
lets
there's
in
been a lot of crashing and smashing and cartoony nonsense with the cat running around the room
right.
with its tail on fire,
Yeah. So she lets in the maid. It's obviously Cinderella,
but in a bonnet.
but in a bonnet. And
It's very Handmaid's Tale because it's hiding her face.
yeah, it's a little disturbing. So she starts to clean things up. She sees the mice have the key under the teacup, and
Okay, she also does a weird voice. She's like, "Oh, it's housekeeping."
yeah. Oh, and the stepmother goes, "You got here remarkably fast." And she goes, "We're really good at our jobs."
She's
it's
just doing a very silly, high-pitched voice.
it's really weird. It's a bizarre choice. I think they want us to not know that it's Cinderella, is which
Yeah,
it
because they're
obviously is.
hiding her face from us as well.
Yeah. So she starts to clean things up and sort of helps the mice hide the key or something. The stepmother immediately knows that it's her because it's not a good hide, but we get the reveal because the stepmother, we see her reflection in the bucket of water and she goes, "Isn't that right? Cinderella." And
And then Anastasia goes, "I didn't know you worked here."
it's such a good line.
It's great.
So Cinderella, they have the "I won't let you get away with this. We already have." And Cinderella and the mice run with the wand. The mice have the wand and Cinderella flees and there's more hijinks. The stepmother calls the palace guard on her and says she's a thief. And then
Gus bibbity boppity boos, and Lucifer becomes a horrifying Jack-in-the-Box monster that bounces after them
yeah, because at first you think, oh well, at least it'll be stationary. No, no, this is an evil, alive Jack in the Box cat, and
with a cat head on top of the Jack-in-the-Box situation.
it is chasing them. Lucifer then gets turned into a tiny cat, cat-sized for mice. If mice had cats,
Proportionally the same as
proportionally
humans.
cat-sized for mice. As for I'm gonna stop, but is still terrifying and able to attack them for reasons. Probably because cats are
Because cats
dangerous.
are terrifying. I've had cats attack me. That was
Oh yeah,
completely correct. I have
yeah,
a quick question for you. That's just, I have to ask before I forget it.
yes.
What was more upsetting for you? When Lucifer had the head of a cat and the body of a goose, or when Lucifer had the head of a cat and the body of a Jack in the Box?
Oh, the Jack in the Box, absolutely.
See, I found the goose more upsetting because of the slow reveal.
Yeah, but at least both of those parts are supposed to move. Jacks in the Box are supposed to be stationary. I don't like the concept of inanimate objects chasing me with evil intent.
Ah.
It's just one of my
The
existential
accordion neck
horrors.
was really upsetting.
It was upsetting. And I just, I'm not afraid of clowns, but I do have a terror that inanimate objects will attack me.
Anyway, the two mice take the wand into a mouse hole, but because Lucifer is very small, he's able to follow them in.
But then they
Um,
bibbity bobbity boos him again,
and
and
he becomes big.
but like bigger, like not cat sized. He becomes dog sized now, but just for a
Yeah,
second. Cinderella locks herself in a room and uses a sword to shove through the handles of a door.
like
So
Keira Knightley tried in Pirates of the Caribbean. She has a
yeah,
very Keira Knightley in Pirates of the Caribbean vibe.
she does.
This is when she starts being an action girl who's like
Yes.
capable of thinking on her feet while running and like doing like athletic feats.
So at this point, the birds have got the prince, and the two little bluebirds from before are pulling at his sleeves and pants and literally dragging him. And his response is, "This is weird, but okay." Just himbo response. Just, well, okay, I guess I'll
He
go with these birds
he's
now.
he literally says, "All right, I'm coming." Like, what else are you gonna do? I guess this is what I'm doing today.
He's very amenable, is what I'm going to say for this prince. The character trait that he gets is easygoing.
So everything's coming together. He's in the area. You know, the mice are like catch, and Cinderella gets the wand and she goes, lift the spell on him, let him remember bibbity bobbity.
And the guards get her
And the guards get her.
before she can say boo, because I guess if someone's touching you, you can't say boo.
Or if you're surprised, you have to start over because you paused. I don't know. And then Lady Tremaine like pulls the wand out of her hand because she's not paying attention. And Cinderella goes, please, you're under a spell. That's why you don't remember me. And she reaches for the prince and she touches his hand. and you hear this little kind of like ping noise, and you see
Yeah,
on his face that he definitely felt like
a
something.
spark. He felt something. There was static electricity there.
So she's carried away, and he tells his dad, he tells someone, she seemed nice when I met her. Maybe a little confused, but still, there's something about her.
I think he's talking to Lady Tremaine at that point.
Oh my God.
And she goes, she's clearly a troubled young woman. I'll see to it personally that she gets all the help she needs.
That's right.
No,
And
thank
then
you.
Drizella, like a dum-dum, goes, nice try, but we won.
And the
And
prince
the prince,
goes,
who's standing right next to her,
it's like,
is
you,
like, what do you mean?
what do you mean you won? And
Literally, she's got nothing. She's like, oh, nothing?
nothing, bye, and just runs away.
And you know that, like, the fallout from Lady Tremaine is coming.
Yes. So Lady Tremaine tells the guard to put Cinderella on the next boat to be banished, and tells Drizella, be careful or you're going to be banished next, which is intense, but okay.
Yeah.
So now we get a scene with the king and the prince talking, and this is the fun mirror scene.
The
Not that it's a
funhouse
fun
mirror.
scene with a mirror, but it's a fun house mirror. Thank you. Like,
Yes.
I want to be clear, no part of this was fun.
Oh, I had a lot of fun.
Oh well.
So the king is getting fitted for like a fancy suit or whatever, and his reflection makes him look taller and like broad chested, whatever. And he's like, ah, yes, this is great. And then you see the prince coming up to him, and as he's moving forward, you see his reflection in the mirror get weirder and like
It's a fun house
gooier.
mirror.
It's a
Yeah.
funhouse mirror. And he goes, Dad, something strange is going on. And his father's like, yeah, you're getting married. And the prince is like, no, I mean, something's wrong. I
Yep.
don't know what happens next. I have a blank in my
So
notes.
the mice get the prince's attention is
Oh,
what
they do.
happens
Okay.
next.
I have that in my notes as next. I didn't realize
That literally happens right now next. It's
right
not even a
now.
scene change. It's
Okay.
in the same scene.
Okay. I was like, that's too jarring. What did I miss?
No, it's the mice. So Jack and Gus are in that room with the king and the prince on a different dresser, sort of hopping and yelling at the prince to get his attention.
And then
He
they go,
freaks out
psst.
a little bit, sort of staggers back, and then basically has a, well, whatever. I guess I'll go follow these talking mice.
He's like, okay, first birds, now mice. And he like tries talking to them. He's like, hello, little
So
mice.
he
It's
goes into
official. I've lost my mind.
so they run into a secondary room, and it's a storeroom full of random stuff, and he follows, but he can't find them right away, and he says out loud to himself, first I was hijacked by birds and now I'm talking to imaginary mice. It's official. I've lost my mind. And the mice come out at that point and
Well,
go, Princey, and
at
he
that
goes,
point,
okay, not imaginary.
no, at that point, the birds pull open the shades,
Oh, right,
and the birds have little outfits. So, like, they're not regular birds. And then the light shines a spotlight onto the mice, and they're like, Prince, Prince, over here.
And he goes, oh, good, not imaginary. And so that's actually the worst outcome. If you have imaginary talking mice, that's better than not imagined talking mice. That's not
Well,
the best. I'm just saying, if you have imaginary talking mice,
I mean, there's you're imagining, you're hallucinating, or they're real, actual talking mice. And some of those options are better than others.
they are.
So the mice try to explain like the whole magic thing, but they're talking all at once.
And really fast.
And the prince
And
is like, I think I understand. And you're like, oh my goodness, this
really?
is why the prince and Cinderella are like meant to be together. He is also communing
So,
with the mice. And then he's like, actually, I got nothing.
which I thought was a really great moment of reality. You're trying to listen to two small mice squeak at you in their weird pigeon talk over one another, and then
So their solution to this problem is that they're gonna do it via song. So they sing a song. Her name is Cinderella. She's the girl you met. Cinderella was the maiden at the ball.
it's
Gus finds having
at the
hypnotized.
ball, Cinderella's at the ball. It's but in high pitched awful mouse voices, and it just goes on. And basically, they just retell us the entire movie in song format. So if you were to walk into the movie right now, you would be up to date.
Yeah.
Because it includes the fairy godmother getting turned to stone, and it includes the prince being magic, and it includes everything. This is, you could
This is
walk
how
in.
they pitched this movie.
This is absolutely how they pitched this movie. I think it might have been with this actual song and this actual dance number. So,
Gus does the hypnotized eyes again to explain to the prince that he's like
under spell.
enchanted.
Mhm.
Which I want to know, how does he do the eyes? Because they like pulsate and they're green.
Yeah, green and yellow, the spiral.
And the prince is like, wait, you're telling me I'm under a spell? And they're like, yep,
Yes.
it's
And he
up
goes,
to Princey Prince to save the day.
yes, that makes perfect sense.
That would explain everything.
Sure, my dude, why not? And so then the birds fly in and they have pieced together the broken glass shoe. I want to know how. I want to know how these birds gathered up the splinters of a glass shoe and glued them back together, because it's very clearly glued together
Maybe
cracked
some
glass.
other mice did it, because we don't see any of the other mice other than Gus and Jack.
Okay, maybe Mary's still at the house. Maybe Mary does it.
Which
She
is
seems really
weird because we
competent.
saw all of the mice. We saw
So many mice.
so many mice
Yeah,
in the second one. And then
this
this one, they're like,
just the
nobody
two.
liked the mice.
We got the memo.
We need way fewer mice.
Not that we shouldn't have them drive the plot, but just less of them. That was the problem. There were just too
That was
many
what they
of
got.
them.
And they're like, okay. At this point, the prince thinks that her name is Cinderella because that's what the mice call her. So he's like, is this Cinderella's? It belongs to her? I have to find her.
And he leaves. And my notes go, oh no, why is there a reprise Kill Me Now? Because the mice have a slow kick line, chorus line reprise of their horrific song.
They
The
go,
prince,
one more time. And then
and our notes both go, no, 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 not that.
so
And
they do the reprise, and the prince peeks his head in, and he goes, "Oh, thanks," and love the song.
what did your notes say right after that line? Anything?
Uh, Nothing, because I was like, why? Why did that happen? Why is he like this? Why did they choose this for his personality? They could have picked anything.
Yeah, my notes just have all caps. No, you didn't. No one enjoyed that song. So the prince is now convinced. The prince is sold and starts to race out of the palace. The king gets in his way and stops him and says, "Where are you going?" And the prince says, "No, the mice told me I have the wrong girl." And the king is trying to talk to him, and the prince is like, "But the birds, they were birds too." And the king goes, "Talking birds?" And he goes, "No, only the mice talk, Dad." It's actually really funny. And he's going down the stairs, and the king plants himself in front of the prince and goes, "I forbid you to take one more step down these stairs." And the prince shrugs and goes, "Okay," and flings himself out of a window.
And he launches himself like onto a horse. Meanwhile, the king, whose pants have fallen off during this process, so he's wearing like hot pink shorts underneath. He's like, "Please, we'll get you help. We'll find you a doctor. We'll have you leeched."
Yep, I love that line.
And he runs out, and he's standing in front of the prince, who's now on a horse, and he's like, "Stop, stop." And the prince is like, "Dad, trust me." And the king's like, "I do trust you. It's the talking mice I'm worried about." So the prince just goes around him, and they try to close the gates on him, and he tells his horse, "You'll be fine, don't look up." And then they show us that the gates have like these sharp, scary points at the bottom, and the horse has the face that you would think the horse would have at realizing this. And the prince just goes, "Good boy." And they ride away from the castle.
And the Grand Duke goes, "I'll send the army after him." And the king now has a wistful look on his face again and goes, "No, let him go." What? Why
Yeah,
is he
it's super
nostalgic?
weird.
Yes, I don't understand the king's rapid just descents into nostalgia. So we cut to Cinderella, and she's literally in a tumbrel. She's in and I'm going to go to the guillotine and have my head cut off cart.
Yes. She
That's not
also
what
has a
happens.
new hairstyle.
She does. It's now down and raggedy.
Yes. It's very
She,
Les Miserables.
it is. So the evil guards walk her up the gangway of a ship. It's a very pretty ship.
There's
And
seagulls like screaming in the back. It's like dark. She's walking up the plank with her hair like blowing in the wind. It's very
Sadly,
dramatic.
it
She
is.
looks over her shoulder, the castle's there in the distance, and they're like, time to go. And then she's on the boat, and like the boat is leaving.
Yeah, ominous music. We get a reprise of the "I thought my life was a fairy tale" song, and the
Mm-hmm.
gangplank gets pulled up, and the ship casts off, and the ship starts to sail away. The prince is riding very fast, sees the ship leaving, gets to the dock. The ship has left the dock. There's it's gone. So he sees that it is going to pass under by a cliff, essentially the cliffs of Dover. So he takes his horse very fast and rides back through the village and up to a cliff and tells his
This
horse it'll
kingdom
be
now has
okay.
cliffs.
Yeah, didn't have cliffs before. It's
He
okay.
he also doesn't just like run up a cliff. There's like a mill or something on the edge of the cliff,
Yes.
and he runs the
Mhm.
horse through the mill, intending for the horse to leap out the window to land on the ship with him. And the horse
Mhm.
is like, no, and
Uh-uh.
stops
No.
abruptly. So the prince gets flung through the window and flies through the air. And then, Liv, would you like to describe what happens next?
Oh, I would. I would so much. So he catches a rope, swings around one of the masts, lands on a sail, not on the yard arm above the sail, just hits the sail kind of kaploof. Gets out a knife and plunges the knife into the sail and uses it to slow his descent down and lands in a Avengers 3-point landing on the deck and looks up and sees Cinderella, who's the only other person on the deck. And she is, by the way, aft. She is back where the captain and the navigator and the spinny wheel are. She's not supposed to be back. She's in the wrong part of the ship. I did some sailing
She's in
stuff
the
too, okay, guys?
romantic part of the ship.
I'm a pirate. The ship was wrong.
The prince is also a pirate. His hair's
Tussles.
kind of like windswept and blowing in the wind.
Yes. And he walks up to her and goes, "Remember me?" And reaches for her. And now the clouds are pretty and they're pink and there's the sunset. And I guess the touching releases the spell because we watch his memories come back and his memories are now him dancing with her at the
Well,
ball again.
so when they hold hands, they feel true love, and true love is stronger than magic.
Evidently. So he gets down
But
on one
not the
knee.
first time, only the second time.
No. Well, I guess it's prolonged hand contact.
Or I guess
As
like it's mutual hand contact.
yes.
So she flies into his arms and he goes, "Will you marry me, Cinderella?"
Yes.
And she goes, "Yes, but it's actually Cinderella." And then Lady Tremaine goes, "It's not over yet."
I have Lady Tremaine expostulating evilly.
Yeah.
And Anastasia is very sad and she's saying, "But I thought he loved me."
Oh, for clarity's sake, we have like a very dramatic cut to the stepmother and stepsisters in the palace. Is
Right,
what
right.
happened.
Sorry.
But it's also like metatextual.
And so they're looking out of the window, and Cinderella and the prince have now arrived in the courtyard, and the king is greeting them, and they're pointing angrily up at the window where they can see the stepmother and stepsister. So things are going poorly.
And Anastasia's like, "Oh, I thought he loved me," which is
Why? He was
like,
literally under a spell.
he knew that.
You watch that happen.
I would buy her falling in love with him, but
Mhm.
her thinking he's in love with her despite the spell rather than because of it.
Yeah, I have no idea why they leaned so hard into Anastasia believing that the prince loved her. That's extremely weird. And essentially Anastasia's saying, "Oh, it's all over now. It's we're done for," essentially. And Lady Tremaine goes, "Do you want the prince to love you?" And
Then
Anastasia
do
says,
exactly as I say.
"Yes." And the doors open dramatically and they both disappear in a big puff of green smoke. And then we cut to the king resting.
It was very dramatic.
Mhm.
So the king is laying back with like a cold compress on his forehead, and the Grand Duke is like, it appears they have fled. We searched the entire castle and we can't find them. And the king like freaks out. He's like, "Then search the entire kingdom," and he yells at the Grand Duke. And then he lies back down and he goes, "Oh, but then I'm an old man."
My heart can't take this pressure.
And then he looks at Cinderella and the prince, and he's like, "Please tell me this is the one you're marrying." And the prince is like, "All the stars are shining brighter, just like you said." And it's actually very cute.
Yeah. And now the king is happy and no longer is worried about his blood pressure. And so
And
he
hops
dances
up and like
and
is
dances with the
fine.
Grand Duke while Jack and Gus dance together. The exact same choreography. Why? Who knows?
So then Cinderella is getting ready for the wedding, and the birds are helping her with the veil, and we kind of get like a little bit more of a look at her wedding dress.
Mhm.
Liv, do you want to describe it?
It looks like her blue dress, but it's white.
It has the long sleeves, and
It
it's
has
got
long.
like an asymmetrical neckline. I thought
It
you'd have things to say about it.
I don't. I like her second wedding dress. Her initial wedding dress is very sort of whatever. It's got a V neckline. It has long sleeves. It's white. It's got a poofy skirt. She has a nice cap on her hair with a long veil flowing from it. It's pretty.
So Cinderella's getting ready for the wedding. She's standing in front of the mirror.
And we hear the stepmother say, "How lovely you look, my dear." And then we see her appear from behind the drapes. We see this through the mirror. So we again get a very creepy Lady Tremaine sneaks out of a mirror scene.
And then Cinderella like whips around and she's not there. And then slowly Lady Tremaine comes out of the dark and she's petting Lucifer, who's in her arms, just for the drama of it.
Just for the Bond villain aspect. There's no reason for Lucifer to be there.
And he doesn't like being there. He like leaps out of her hands.
Immediately. Not a happy cat.
Yeah. And she goes, "It appears you are right, Cinderella. The prince does want to marry you, and marry you he shall." And then she calls for Anastasia, and she slowly comes out of the shadows. She's kind of walking hunched over, and you see her silhouette first. And as she comes into the light, you see that it's Cinderella. So this is where I think the mirror motif comes to life, is because you have two Cinderellas. And that's
All
why they
right.
were so heavy on mirrors this whole time.
Okay. All right.
I could write a paper on this.
I would love to read that paper. That would be hysterical. And so
Duality and dichotomy through the lens of a mirror in
no,
Cinderella 3, A
stop it.
Twist in Time.
Stop it. Stop it.
Subtitle. I didn't have a subtitle, so I'll stop. So Lady Tremaine is like, "The prince will never know." And Cinderella kind of looks at Anastasia and she's like, "But will you even be happy?" And Anastasia just goes very sadly, "I want what you have."
Right? It's a sad scene.
Yeah. And then Lady Tremaine magics Cinderella away and she's inside the pumpkin. And the pumpkin is like growing and it's an evil pumpkin with tentacles and it keeps getting bigger, but Cinderella's like still really cramped inside of it. And her dress is all torn up and her hair is all frazzled.
Hmm. And it is very much the realistic what would happen if you tried to make a pumpkin a coach because it's full of slimy pumpkin seeds and gross stuff inside. And what it's growing instead of tentacles, it's instead of the vines which normally make the wheels, it's got thorns which wrap around and keep her from being able to get out because there's a window or something, but she can't get out because there's thorns. And
Mhm.
then the pumpkin catches a horse
It's
with
horrible.
thorns.
And the
It's
horse like looks like really upset.
oh well, yeah, it was a happy horse and now it's full of thorns.
Okay, you remember the horse screaming in the Mighty Mouse Cinderella?
Yeah.
That level of upset.
Yeah, it was definitely that level upsetting. We then cut to Lady Tremaine who tells Lucifer to make sure they don't come back alive.
Yeah. She's actively like
This
saying,
is definitely a murder movie now. So Lucifer appears in space above the coach and turns into the coachman. Cinderella recognizes him instantly.
well, so
Uh,
did I.
yeah, why would you not?
I mean, she's familiar with what an animal looks like transformed into a human. She's seen it a couple times now.
All right.
He looks very much like Lucifer. He's in the same coloring.
Yeah,
Presumably she saw him floating in the air before he landed on the
and
on
he's pot-bellied and has a wide evil smile. And now we're not in Cinderella anymore. We're now in Sleepy Hollow. Uh
Yeah, the horse is going very fast.
we're
The
on a
carriage
haunted
is
pumpkin
very
ride,
creepy. And it still has tentacles like moving around.
flailing, and she's just getting slammed around inside, and we get I guess these aren't hijinks, but we get antics now with the mice trying to pull the
The
pin
mice were sent inside the pumpkin with Cinderella.
because they were in her pocket or something.
Yeah.
So the mice are there and they are trying to pull the pin out that attaches the coach to the horse.
Which is
And
dumb because why would you create a pin if you were making this out of vines?
yeah, so whatever.
Cinderella is an action girl again, and she's trying to break through the side of the pumpkin by like kicking and tackling it.
She literally punches her way through the side of the pumpkin
Yeah, and then she crawls around the outside of it and is like trying to get to where Lucifer is sitting.
because Lucifer now has Gus.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Lucifer has Gus, and Cinderella yells, "Let him go!" And he does. But the mice are okay. He like
They
falls.
they catch themselves on stuff.
Yeah, they like fall to where the
The
pin
pin
is.
is, yeah, it's fine. So
Cinderella pulls at a vine, and it
she
makes
she breaks his seat. He's sitting on sort of a vine structural seat, and she pulls one of the vines, and the seat breaks.
collapses underneath him, and he falls into like a pond. And she goes, "Bad kitty," like she's in an action movie.
Yes. We're also on a and he becomes a cat again now. So I guess
Because I
water
think water makes the magic
or
disappear,
just
or trauma.
well, so hear me out. In D&D, if you transform yourself into a different animal, you get that animal's hit points. If you lose all of those hit points, like if you die in that form, you become yourself again minus that
You
number of
think
hit
he
points.
died?
Well, I think that the man died and then the spell ended, so he came back as a cat, like he was the spell. This is polymorph. I think he was polymorphed into an evil coachman, and then he lost all his hit points when he fell off a cliff because fall damage is like really intense in D&D. And then the polymorph ended because he lost all his hit points, and now he's a cat again. We're not safe though because we are still have an evil pumpkin with a crazed in pain horse racing across a very narrow cliff top track.
And oh no, there's a hole coming up
There's a big section missing.
because we need more action adventure in the Cinderella cartoon.
In this Cinderella cartoon. So Cinderella leaps from the carriage onto the horse, still covered in thorns. And for some reason, it's no longer attached. I guess they were able to pull the pin.
Yes, the mice undo the pin, and they all leap, and the carriage falls into the hole, but the horse makes it across.
The horse is able to stop in time.
And there's like evil green magic steam coming up from the
Yeah.
broken carriage.
Yeah, the pumpkin gets all smashed and turns back into a regular pumpkin instead of an evil pumpkin, and evil green smoke rises from it.
The horse is now calm, and Cinderella like pets it and looks at the castle and goes, "Well, I'm not gonna miss my own wedding."
Which is in response to the mice go, "What are you going to do?" And she goes, "Well, I'm not going to miss my own wedding." And it's a weird comedy beat to have after
Yeah.
you just had this really intense Sleepy Hollow scene. And guys, I want to stress this was Sleepy Hollow. They were racing through fog, bare trees, even though this is the middle of summer because we watched a bunch of fields be all green and healthy, but this is a creepy dead forest full of cliffs and bogs. Anyways,
It's real spooky. So we cut to giant CGI bells ringing, which is so dumb because they had to animate the bells ringing, and they were regular looking bells for like that weird magic scene that was like undoing everything because it unrung those bells.
yeah, we got to sing up the bells unringing, which I don't think you can unring a bell. I think that's just
I think
ringing
that's
a bell again.
so, but now there's CGI and it's really glaring. And now we're in 2007, and I'm like more judgmental of their use of CGI than I was back in the previous one when we were in 2002.
So we cut to the inside of the palace. We're in a massive wedding scene. The prince is waiting at the altar. Anastasia, I'm going to continue to refer to her as Anastasia, but I
Yes,
want to be
but
clear.
she looks like Cinderella currently, but she's
She is
still
shaped.
Anastasia voice.
Yeah, she's shaped like Cinderella. So the king is thanking her for being his son's true love. And Anastasia sort of whispers to him, "So, you know it's true love when you touch someone's hand, right?" And he goes, "That's how I've always understood it." And she's still holding the shell that he gave her.
Yes, in her hand. There's so many Anastasia and the King beats. It's
I
it was a really interesting narrative choice to have this be part of the way she develops a relationship, but I don't think it works for me.
Well, I don't think it works because they didn't lean into it hard enough. If they'd leaned into it just a little bit harder, it would totally have worked.
I think they could have really played it off as the king is being nice to her and he's not even under a spell. Like the prince has to be nice to me, he's under a spell, but
Well,
the
yeah.
king is just being sweet.
Well, and the king is clearly being sweet because she reminds him of his dead wife, both visually because she has the same bright red ringlets and is much taller than him, and is also kind of awkward and dances badly.
I mean,
And
that part, I think they went the wrong way with that. I don't think that that should have been there because that puts it in the romantic territory for me.
that's what I'm leaning on this. I think that Anastasia needs to end up with the king.
I don't think that would be a good idea for either of them, but I would watch it.
So the marriage ceremony is happening, and the prince sort of leans down and says,
My one and only Cinderella, which
"Yeah,
is a little on the nose.
yep."
Um,
They're playing the Mendelssohn's Bridal March, by the way, which is just it's one of my favorite wedding songs. And the stepmother is watching evilly from the curtains while this happens.
so there's a little bald priest, and he's very tiny, and he's in a very giant like
Robe.
outfit.
Yeah.
So he looks very turtly, and he
Yes.
goes, "Dearly beloved," and the Grand Duke is like, "So far, so good," and the king's like, "Well, he's not married yet." So everyone's like very nervous about this wedding still.
And we can see that Anastasia is sad. We see that Cinderella, the real Cinderella, has arrived, but like can't get in because there's guards. So she's at the end of this entrance hall, unable to get in, and they're saying their I do's. And Anastasia says, I,
And the mice are like helping Cinderella, and they go up the pants of the guards,
mhm.
and they kind of like run away, and
And
Cinderella's like able to get there, and then the prince and Anastasia like touch hands, and Anastasia goes,
I don't. And the prince is really confused because he's touching her hand and there's nothing there. Also,
yeah,
she just said, I don't.
it's a lot to process.
It's a lot. He's having a rough day. The priest faints.
Well, because at that point,
At that,
Cinderella runs into the room and goes, Anastasia. And she
yes.
goes, Cinderella.
And Lady Tremaine storms out from behind her curtain, calls Anastasia spoiled ingrate, and
She goes, You spoiled little ingrate. I've given you everything you've ever wanted, Anastasia. And then she goes, But I want someone to love me for me. And then we get another bibbity bobbity boo with everything becoming green with evil magic,
mhm,
and all of the guards start getting turned into different animals. Lady
chickens
Tremaine
and
is just going like chickens, rabbits, something
pigs,
else. There we
chickens.
go.
Yeah. And then she goes to cast evil bibbity bobbity boo magic on Anastasia. Cinderella jumps in front of Anastasia. They're both shaped like Cinderella, just being very clear again. As though that's going to stop Lady Tremaine, who
Yeah,
laughs
she
and
didn't think
goes,
that through.
even
That would
better.
have worked. Yeah, that would have possibly worked the other way around, which again is very confusing because they both look like Cinderella.
Yeah, but the real Cinderella is now in a torn up dress and has down hair because she's been through Sleepy Hollow.
Yes. So at this moment, the prince intervenes and he runs in front of them and reflects the magic with his sword. So the spell that the evil stepmother was casting bounces off his sword because we've already established that magic bounces off metal for whatever reason.
Because it's
And
light
it
based.
Sure, and it hits Lady Tremaine and Drizella, and they're transported back to like where all of the dishes were being washed,
They're
and they're
I'm
both
sorry.
frogs.
Yeah, they're turned into frogs.
Yeah, I was getting to that part.
Frogs. Okay, I'm so sorry. So Anastasia, in the body of Cinderella, takes Cinderella's hand and says, "This is Cinderella, your true love," and then holds the prince's hand and puts their hands together. And it's kind of a cute scene. And she walks away, and Anastasia picks up the wand, and everybody now gets real nervous because
Yes.
she's got the magic wand, which fell down when Lady Tremaine was turned into a frog. But she picks it up and she says bibbity bobbity boo and points it at herself and turns has the same it's no longer green, it's now back to being silver sparkles, and she turns back into herself.
She looks
And
very sad. Like she's not happy to be herself.
it's a sad sort of relieved feeling. And the king goes, I can't take any more of this. And my notes go, you and me both, man.
My notes actually had the same thing.
Yeah.
So Cinderella walks over to Anastasia and slowly kind of like touches her on the shoulder, and then she hugs her and says, "Thank you."
Hmm.
And then, she takes the wand and they both say bibbity bobbity, and then Anastasia says boo, and the fairy godmother appears. She's like stretching. She's like, "Oh man, I'm real sore,
Real stiff.
real stiff." That's the one. And then Anastasia comes up to the king and she's like, "Your Majesty, I don't deserve this." And she tries to give him back the seashell that he gave to her because it's so meaningful. And he goes, "Everyone deserves true love," and like kind of closes her hand over it. And there's a ping sound. There was a definite ping sound when he touched her hand.
That's why I'm saying I think they need to be romantic leads together.
And then she hugs him.
The fairy godmother then bibbity bobbity boos Cinderella into a different wedding dress.
I hate that this is now a verb. They have to say bibbity bobbity boo every single time, which was not the case in the first movie or in the second one.
Well, it was the case in the first movie because that song has nothing but bibbity bobbity boo going on in the background.
I guess.
The
But she
second
didn't
one,
like say it every single time she did something. Like she
Well-
can just point and magic happens. Anyway,
anyways, so this dress, I will talk about it, has a really lovely off the shoulder collar. It with I'm not sure, it's sort of a cowl top. It's got these big off the shoulder diagonal front pieces. I don't have the words for them. I'm so sorry.
wings?
Wings. They look wing-like, thank you. And it's a tighter bodice again and a sort of a flowier skirt. It's not quite as obnoxiously 1950s round. And she's wearing another veil, and it's very pretty. It's a pretty dress. It in no way fits with the visual look of anything else that's existed in this universe. It is straight out of the 60s. It's a very 1960s dress. I don't know why it's there.
But
I
it's
don't know.
beautiful.
It's very pretty, but it doesn't go with whatever timeline they think that they're in, or pretending that they think they're in, or have thought that they were pretending that they think they're in. But it's a pretty dress, so I'm not, of all the things in this movie, I'm not choosing to be mad about that. And so then we get my favorite line. The fairy godmother goes, "Would you like me to return you to your former lives?" And the prince and Cinderella both go, "Former lives?" And the fairy godmother goes, "Well, you had, I mean, oh, never mind."
Because while she's trying to explain this to them, they're like looking at each other and they're both so besotted with each other that she's like, it doesn't matter. They're happy.
Never
They're
mind.
fine.
And so the king goes, "Does anyone want to marry my son?" And Cinderella goes, "I do." And the priest wakes up from a dead faint on the floor and goes, "I now pronounce you man and wife."
At this point, I noticed that the fairy godmother seems to have left without fixing all the animal guards, because you still see a couple of rabbit guards like on the king's throne with him. But that's probably fine for them in their lives. Anyway, Cinderella and the prince like hug each other, and then they look at each other and there's a beat, and you kind of think that they're not going to kiss, but then they do kiss.
Yeah, and we cut to outside and there's big fireworks going on behind the palace. It's a very dramatic scene. And it ends with a Cinderella voiceover saying, "And then they lived happily ever after, again." And then we are finished. If you want to wade through the credits are a whole bunch of weird portraits of them in the style of old, or rather new paintings. So there's like the stepmother as the Scream, or the Grand Duke in the Scream painting.
Yeah.
And it's just stuff like that. It's actually really clever, and I'm mad that they saved all of their interesting, clever stuff for the credits.
There's also a portrait of Anastasia with like the chef, presumably from the second movie, but he doesn't.
Yes. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about.
Okay, wait, one last thing. There's like this weird soft rock song playing that like was so out of tune with every other musical piece that they chose for this movie. So I looked it up. It's sung by Hayden Panettiere, if that means anything to anyone. She was the star of like that Heroes TV show. She was in like the second Bring It On movie or the third one or something. It's just a weird choice. And the whole song is like, I still believe in destiny. You and I are meant to be, etc., etc. Okay, the end. Now you can talk to me about the timeline.
Okay, so what this means is that we don't know anything about their first year together.
Yes, I agree. Because the contents of the second movie all happen after the third movie.
Yes. So what happens is Cinderella goes to a ball. The next day, the Grand Duke shows up. All of this movie happens in the next day. So Cinderella, on essentially Friday night, goes to a magic ball with a prince, falls in love. On Saturday, sneaks into the palace to become the royal mouse catcher, gets shipped off to America, put into a magic evil pumpkin sent to Sleepy Hollow, gets married, and then the next day on Sunday, goes on her honeymoon for what we can assume is a week or something, comes back, and then they're mad at her that she doesn't know how to host a banquet.
Yeah.
Okay. The
I think
timeline of this
no,
is
I think the timeline makes perfect sense, but it's like bad. Like
well,
I don't like it.
it follows, but then why is she I
Okay, so it does explain why she's nicer to Anastasia.
it does.
It does not explain why she's okay with Lady Tremaine and has invited her and Drusilla to a ball.
It does explain why Prudence keeps forgetting that she's not a servant.
Oh. Oh, I like that.
Yes. It
But
doesn't explain
but
why
not why she doesn't recognize her in servant's clothes.
no. It's so weird. And which means that within those three parties that we watched in the second movie, they happened once a month or something. Which means that within 3 months, Jack and Gus no longer feel useful, even though they literally saved her from falling to her death in an evil pumpkin thorn cliff transmogrified cat incident. They no
Well, where
longer
do you
feel
go from there?
you have a nap after that. You have a nappy nap. You take a little snoozle. Well, we've now finished this saga. We normally ask highs and lows here. I'm not really even sure.
I've got some.
You have okay, good, good, good. What are your highs and lows for this, the third and final movie, knock on wood, of this horrific franchise?
Okay. So the carriage was very frightening, but it wasn't a low for me because I thought it was just very cool and dramatic. My real low is Cinderella's voiceover every time she talks directly to us and makes like a jokey joke, like a kind of like wink.
Yeah.
I hate it. I don't
Mhm.
want her to talk to me ever. For my high, I like that it was goofy. You know, I like the time travel shenanigans. I thought it was fun. I think my high is like how bananas the prince was.
I yeah. This is one of those movies that is so bad that it goes all the way back around and is fun to watch again. It doesn't become good, but it does become fun to watch again.
Yeah, I don't even know how I could possibly grade it.
This one's going to be hard to grade. I'm kind of putting that off.
So what are your highs and lows?
Ah, I think my low would have to be the mouse song.
Ooh, bad.
Yeah. But if I wasn't allowed to pick the songs, because the songs again are all really bad, I think the portrayal of Anastasia and Drusilla as forgetting how to be functional humans was a
Okay,
real low.
you know what I hated?
What?
The only part of the second Cinderella that I enjoyed was Anastasia's like really abrasive personality.
Yeah.
And then they didn't do that this time.
No, in this one she doesn't have an abrasive personality. She's already I mean, she by the end of this movie, she's sort of sweet and learning to
She
understand
knows how
love.
to smile.
She knows how to smile. She knows what it feels like to be in love with somebody. Which, and then she goes back to Lady Tremaine, which it's never discussed how they get out of frog form. And I want to know what happens at that household after.
I mean, that's their punishment, is that they all have to stay together.
But it's clearly going fairly fine, because in the second movie,
That's true.
Lady
They're not
Tremaine,
doing chores anymore.
no, they're back to where they were. Everything's fine. Like maybe Lady Tremaine made some more fiscally sound decisions or something. She used like futures, literal, like insider trading to know when the fantasy stock market was going to crash. But she's walking past one of the scenes. She's walking past Anastasia's room, and Anastasia's brushing her hair. Lucifer's fine again, and Lady Tremaine is just like, "Oh, my daughter's being a little bit weird. Did I see her dancing? No, it's fine. Girls, we must go to the palace with Cinderella. She's
I
throwing a
mean,
ball." It's just, it doesn't make, that is the part of the timeline that really screws with me, because okay, sure, the timeline and then this year and then you get the future is fine. 132 is a fine order. But the way that Lady Tremaine behaves with her daughters and towards Cinderella in this post Sleepy Hollow pumpkin murder scheme is just weird.
I
It
mean,
also makes the line that Anastasia says where she goes, "Well, you've always had it easy," even dumber.
we can't talk about the second movie when we're trying to judge this one. I think we really have to look at this as a standalone, because contextually it doesn't make sense. Like, the context is money. They wanted money, so they made a third one, and they didn't care if it aligned with the story. They didn't care if it had the feel of the Cinderella, like the original one. Like, they weren't going for that. They were just like, we have these characters, we need to make money. Ta-da.
All right. Okay. I got distracted from highs and lows. Okay. So my lows are the mouse songs. I hated the mouse songs. I hated there was a reprise of the mouse song. I was so angry about that.
I didn't need that at
My
all.
my highs would be, honestly, I think it would be the pumpkin scene. It was really gritty. It was really good.
That's gonna
And it
traumatize some kids.
and it was a great imaginative interpretation of, okay, what if it was evil though?
Mm-hmm.
And they did it really well. And it's hard to, evil pumpkin is, that's a bit of a challenge. Evil pumpkin. But they did it. Evil pumpkin. And it was scary. And the setting was definitely alarming. So I think the
Yes.
dark things that they animated were really good. When they get pulled away from one another in their memories, it's a really
Oh, I
dark,
love that.
right? I think the really dark stuff that they leaned into was where they really shone. This was, by
Mm-hmm.
the way, also animated. This was the final Disney Australia film. So this was animated in Australia.
Hmm.
And then it was the last one after this, they closed down shop. The second one was animated mostly in Japan, by the way. Those were the wikis that I fell down. But I thought the things that they did where they were trying to be creative and dark and weird and edgy really worked. And the things where they were trying to be Disney really didn't. So I'm not sure what happened, essentially.
I think it was the direction, because this does read very much like a Disney Channel movie.
It does, but it's not. It's Sleepy Hollow, essentially. It's
Well, I
very
mean, like a Disney Channel original movie for
okay.
like
Okay.
live action.
Yeah, okay.
It feels like it's meant for an older audience. It feels like the jokes that they're trying to do, the kind of like in the know humor where like we're poking fun at something.
Yeah.
It feels like they're trying to appeal to slightly older children than the previous one.
But then with scenes like the food fight, that's something that you would do to appeal to small children, because food fights are kind of only funny to a small age.
No, that's still like
No?
a that's why
All
they have
right.
food fights and everything.
Well, I hate food fights. All right. So if you could change something about this movie, what would you change?
I didn't like how they used the mice
Okay.
in this. And I thought that I'd be happy that there was less of them, but I don't like. Okay, so in the first Cinderella, you don't really see her telling the mice like what to do. Like, they decide to help her, and all of the like really crazy things that they decide to do, she didn't tell them like, jump
Go
on
do
this,
that.
go do that, go steal this. They just did that. And so because they kept those so separate, there's this layer of like Cinderella got to exist in a much less silly version of that film.
Hmm.
Because there was like some distance between her and the mouse hijinks. And this one, she's like part of
She's
the mouse hijinks. She's like in it. So
So
we're not seeing things from the mice's point of view, we're seeing them from her point of view, but we're seeing the hijinks. So I wish
yeah,
they'd split that more.
okay.
It was too much like her having a superpower. It really bothered me.
I would, yeah, I agree with you.
I also want to know where the rest of the mice are. It was very strange for me to have seen all of these mice in the first two movies and then just Gus, Gus, and Jack.
I mean, they're very clearly still at the manor. They're very clearly still at Lady Tremaine's house. Because
No,
again,
I
it's been a
understand
day.
like in universe,
Oh,
but I don't understand why they weren't in this like from a production standpoint. Like it's weird. Okay, how about you?
structurally, I would remove a lot of the exposition dumps that we get in the middle of the movie.
You didn't need everything repeated for you multiple times? Were you sober while you watched
No,
this?
I was not. But only mildly. And I just didn't need that many recaps. Because we watch it, and then we watch the mice do a play of it, and then we watch the mice do another play telling the prince. It's just we watch, and then the stepmother exposits a whole bunch, and exposition is necessary, but there's better ways to do it than just
They did the exact same thing twice. Like the mice put on a play twice, once for Cinderella and once for the prince.
yes.
And like that could have actually been a really clever beat where they just tell Cinderella, but they have to act it out for him because he can't understand mice
Because,
like she can.
right, that would have been funny. That would have been cool.
And
But
then
that's
the
not what they
joke where
did.
they have to do the Lady Tremaine hair, then that would have like been good.
That
That
would
would
have
have
made
been a
so
joke.
much sense because they don't need to act it out for Cinderella. We've established they can talk to her. There's just a whole bunch of things that
Why don't
someone.
they hire us for this?
I don't know. I don't know,
This
dude.
is so obvious.
So, do you think our listeners should watch this singly, or this is a saga, or this never?
Okay, I think that our viewers should absolutely watch this. It is also completely unnecessary to watch the second one, or honestly, even the first one if you've never seen it. Nothing matters, nothing makes sense. Just watch this one. It's a delight.
I'm not sure if delight is the word I would use,
It's a
but
delight.
it is really interesting. It's definitely, if you enjoy a really, really good bad movie, this is the one for you. This is fun. Okay, so question. Do you think that this qualifies as Anne Cinderella?
Yes,
Why?
because it fits within the Cinderella story, and like this couldn't be about anybody else.
No, not that it's not about her, but the like goes to a ball or
Oh no, it's not a Cinderella
goes
story in
somewhere
the structure.
where she's not supposed to be and meets. Well, actually, I think it does.
No,
I
you
think
know what this is? It's the Swan Lake.
no.
Yeah.
How is this one? Oh, yeah, okay. I can see Swan Lake parallels.
You've got the evil one impersonating the good one, and the prince is
Y-
dancing with the wrong one,
Yeah,
and
in the
something terrible is going to happen to the correct one.
magic. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Cool. So this is technically a Swan Lake then.
Yes.
Good to know.
Yes.
Um, Sleepy Hollow, Swan Lake, Cinderella.
Um,
So,
what
uh,
grade would you give it?
uh, what are my choices again?
You can go A through F. You can use pluses and minuses.
um, I I think I'm gonna give this a B minus because I had a good time watching it. There were only a couple of parts of it that I really hated, and there were a bunch of parts that were they had a bunch of one-liners that really landed, and they had a bunch of comedy beats that really did land very well. They had a bunch that really didn't, but they had some that did. And that doesn't it's not nothing. They really just did their own thing, and the dark, creepy aspects I really loved. So B minus, but it's not a Cinderella. How about you? What grade would you give this?
Oh, this is an A.
Okay. I think
I,
this is the farthest apart we've ever been on grades.
I mean, in terms of my level of enjoyment, my level of engagement, like 100%, I was into it. I was like, what's gonna happen next? I can say with full honesty, I have never seen a movie like this one before. I mean, I knew that Cinderella and the prince would end up together at the end. I had no idea how the movie was gonna accomplish that.
Right?
And they did cut down significantly on the mice. So even though I thought that the charm that they had in the first Cinderella, they managed to capture none of, it was good. I had a
They
really good
pared it.
time.
Yeah, they pared down a lot of the mouse nonsense to make way for other nonsense, but it was at least human nonsense, so fine. I have nothing else to say about this movie other
Okay.
than the timeline repercussions. Just I try not to think about them because they. I'll wake up at 3 in the morning and be like, but wait, why would Lady Tremaine have done that if she knew that this was? If I could change one thing about this movie, I would have the timeline be the other way around. So I would have it be in chronological order. So the fairy godmother says, do you want your previous life back? Do you want your former timeline back? And they go, yes. And then we go back and we get. I would like the timeline to work out properly. I hate that the timeline doesn't work out.
But it still wouldn't work out properly.
I know it wouldn't, but I'd like
Because
it
in
to
the
work out.
second movie, they say, oh, we're going to the ball at the palace. And in the third movie, they say, and she's never invited us to a ball at the palace.
Yeah, but I hate it.
So anyway,
I'm gonna be up in the middle of the night plotting out the timeline of this.
I don't think you should do that with your time.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done with this stupid thing.
Okay, that's good because it's almost midnight. So thanks for joining us. If you like this episode, please leave us a rating or a review. We'd love to hear from you. So follow us at CinderPod on Twitter and Instagram, like our Facebook page, or email us at thecinderellapodcast@gmail.com. If you want bibbity bobbity bonus episodes or to hear us discuss this week's Cinderella again, but with more substances / adult beverages in the ever after party, please support us at patreon.com/cinderpod. We do an episode for every single thing we review, and they're kooky.
Yeah, so for $1 a month, you get basically double content.
Yeah, just like if you're into that, whatever. No pressure. Our intro music is Bad Ideas by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. Until next week, we hope you have a happily ever after.